and welcome to the Campaign Dispatch. My name is Bee, and today I just wanted to do a quick roundup of some of the elections that are going to be taking place on Tuesday. I guess these technically count as midterm elections because they are taking place in between presidential elections, in other words, in the middle of a presidential term. However, the big midterm elections, the elections for the House of Representatives, about 33% of all U.S. senators, and a huge number of gubernatorial elections, those midterms are the midterms that we usually think of when we say midterms, and those are going to be taking place a year from now in 2026. So the elections that are going to take place on Tuesday are the first set of major election results that we're going to be getting post-Trump taking office. So these are pretty important. Look, there are going to be elections happening all over the country. There are mayoral elections happening in most US cities on Tuesday, which is pretty crazy. But because I'm a person who focuses mostly on national politics, I'm going to be talking about 4 of the big races that are being followed by the national news media right now, just for our purposes, so I don't go on for hours and hours and hours and waste your time. So those 4 races that I'm going to be talking about are the Virginia gubernatorial election between Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Earl Sears, the New Jersey gubernatorial election between Mikey Sherrill and Jack Ciattarelli, the California Prop 50 election, which is an effort by Governor Newsom to redistrict the state of California to pick up a few blue seats and counteract gerrymandering efforts that Trump ordered in Texas and other states. And fourth and finally, last but not least, the very closely followed and hotly contested mayoral election in New York City between Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani and Curtis Sliwa, although Curtis Sliwa is not going to win that election. As for those 4 races, I'm just going to tick through them super quickly, talk about them, talk about their implications for national politics, and hopefully get a better idea heading into Tuesday of what a win or a loss in each of these races could mean. Okay, so beginning with the Virginia gubernatorial elections, I would say this is probably the biggest, most closely watched, at least for DC people and pundits, this is the biggest, most closely watched, sexiest, so to speak, race that's going to be taking place on Tuesday. Although I think that the New York City mayoral election this year especially is particularly interesting to people in Washington, particularly on the Democratic side, because it's really sort of a proxy war for this broader fight that's happening in the Democratic Party and the direction that it's going to go in the future. But that being said, the Virginia gubernatorial election is one of several elections that's going to be taking place in Virginia on Tuesday. There's the Virginia gubernatorial election, there's the Virginia lieutenant gubernatorial election, there's the Virginia attorney general election. The House of Delegates in Virginia, which is their state assembly, their state legislature, is going to be re-electing all of its delegates, right? And so all of these have huge implications. Democrats in Virginia, in the state government, are saying if they win back majorities in the House of Delegates and the state Senate, and they have the governor's mansion, they're going to redistrict in a similar fashion to California and try and counteract some of these Republican efforts to gerrymander Democrats out of a 2026 midterm victory. The Democratic nominee for governor in Virginia is Abigail Spanberger. She's a former congresswoman from Virginia's 7th congressional district. She ran in 2018 against a really obnoxious Republican member of Congress named Dave Brat, who actually beat out Eric Cantor in 2014 in a primary in a huge political shocker. Anyway, that's sort of beside the point. But so in 2018, Abigail Spanberger ran against Dave Brat in these wave elections and won. And she's sort of part of this, I would say, group of Gen X women who were elected to these swing districts who have national security backgrounds. Many of them are veterans and are, have a very sort of specific Clinton-esque New Democrat centrist style. So Abigail Spanberger is one of those. Oddly enough, Mikey Sherrill, the Democratic nominee in New Jersey, is also one of these. Michigan's junior senator Elissa Slotkin is a perfect example of one of these sort of national security moms, as I think they've been dubbed by the national media. All that being said, right, she's a very specific kind of Democrat. And what is interesting to me about this race is Abigail Spanberger is going to win, right? Obviously, everyone needs to go out and vote. But barring anything, crazy, she's going to win. Right now, according to the New York Times, these polls have her up 12, 9, 10, 15, 13 points, right? She's running against Winsome Earl Sears, who I'll get to in a second, who's a very off-putting woman, and is also a Republican in a state full of federal employees during an unpopular Republican presidency. She was already running against a huge tide of Democratic support. And so, yeah, Abigail Spanberger is going to win this. The question is by how much, and it's looking like she's approaching the 13 to 15 point range right now. That would be, it looks like that's, according to the polling, that's her upper ceiling, which is pretty significant. If we look back at the 2017 Virginia gubernatorial elections, which are, I think, a pretty good metric against which to judge Abigail Spanberger's performance, because, think about 2017. This is about a year into the first Trump administration, and so there's huge Democratic support. Democrats are really fired up. This is around the time that Roy Moore lost his Senate seat in Alabama or he was never a senator, but he lost a race for Senate in Alabama against Doug Jones. So Democrats eked out a victory in a Senate election in Alabama, which is like an R+40 state. So this was a time of huge Democratic approval and support for Democrats electorally. And in the 2017 Virginia gubernatorial election, Democrat Ralph Northam won with 53.9% of the vote to Republican Ed Gillespie's 44.9%. So this is a 12-point victory, 11 points. I'm not good at math. This is an 11-point victory. Okay, so if Abigail Spanberger wins by 11 points or more, she's home free. She's good. And that, I think, will also point to a nationwide mood of fierce opposition to the Trump administration. And obviously both parties are going to try and spin this. I really think, and what I say about Abigail Spanberger in terms of what her possible victory could mean for the Democratic Party also goes for Mikey Sherrill, because they're very much similar politicians. They have very similar political brands. But I would caution people to take whatever happens on Tuesday with a grain of salt, okay? And to recognize that, if things go the way the polls are showing, Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill are going to win at the same time as Zohran Mamdani is going to win. So for both camps in the Democratic Party, because I often find myself sort of straddled between them, although leaning more towards the lefty side. The fact of the matter is that you can only extrapolate so much. The centrists are going to try and say, look, Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill won. All we have to do is run, centrist national security moms everywhere and we're going to win. That is not true. That's just not true. Look, they're already operating in a pretty good environment for Democrats. They have high name ID. They're hard fucking workers. They're really hard campaigners. They have run in really tight congressional races over and over and over again. They're fucking battle tested. They're tough. Like Abigail Spanberger was in the CIA. Mike Sherrill was a fucking Navy veteran. Like, these women are not delicate flowers. They're not coasting on their consultants. They're not in a bubble. They're hard at work and they want to do these jobs. That being said, they're running for governor, right? People don't expect their governors to fix the big picture stuff of the American dream is no longer a reality. The fact that it costs a ridiculous amount of money just to live right now. The fact that we have a huge crisis in education, healthcare, our public services are deficient. And so I would caution people to extrapolate too much from these victories, especially about the Democratic brand, and to say that this sort of measured old school politics, this shoe leather campaigning of going around the state on a bus and talking about your poll tested messaging and not taking these super visionary, bold stances, right? They're very much playing a safe, playbook tested campaign. That's a recipe for winning when you're already ahead, as they are in light of the national environment. But I would caution Democratic strategists or politicos or pundits or people who are, doing the, armchair prognosticating, to extrapolate from this that there's somehow some merit in continuing to run what are, pretty unremarkable milquetoast centrist candidates at the national level. That's not supposed to be a knock on Abigail Spanberger or Mikey Sherrill. I think they're, as I say, I think they're very hard workers and very talented politicians, but I would caution to take too much from their victory. Same goes for Zoran Mamdani. You gotta remember, Zoran Mamdani's running in the city of New York. He's not running in Nebraska, okay? He's not running in Iowa. So I would just, but that being said, look, this is a guy who has captured a huge amount of energy. He's a star in the party. He is turning the party in a different direction just by being there, right? He has captured the attention of national political leaders. He's solicited the endorsements of the governor of New York, the Democratic leader in the House. He has received support from Barack Obama, although not an outright endorsement. He received a measly endorsement from Kamala Harris. But the point is, no one is scoring any points dunking on Zoran Mamdani. He represents a path forward, and he's a significant influence in the party. And so anyway, I guess my point would just be to everybody who wants to use this as an opportunity to extrapolate about the future of the Democratic Party, think about the whole of the map. Think about the gubernatorial elections in Virginia and New Jersey. Also think about Zoran Mamdani. And, not for nothing, I think that there is room in the Democratic Party for both Abigail Spanberger, Mikey Sherrill, sort of national security moms, and your Zoran Mamdanis, right? Like, I think there's room for that, like, within the party. That being said, like, I do think that Zoran Mamdani is articulating a broader theory of politics that we haven't really seen before, right? He's talking about the big picture in the way that a presidential candidate would. And for that reason, like, I think it's worth taking a few pages out of his book in terms of how we want to go forward in the future. But back to the issue at hand, which is Virginia. I think that the Virginia election results are going to be pretty significantly shaped by the fact that Virginia is full of federal workers. There are tons of federal workers in Virginia, and a lot of them have probably been fired, or if they haven't been fired, they have been seeing some pretty crazy shit at work, So I think that's going to be shaping their understanding of this race. And look, Virginia has been trending blue for a long time, right? This is a very college-educated state, and with college education comes, increasingly in the Trump era, likelihood of Democratic support. What's more, this is an off-year election, and in the coalitions as they've shifted, right, the more engaged voters, the voters who are more likely to show up in off-year elections are Democrats. And it didn't used to be like this, especially in the Obama years. Like, if you had everybody in the country vote in 2012, Obama would have won by a landslide. If you had everybody in the country vote in 2024, Trump probably would have won by even more, right? The disengaged voters tend to favor Trump. The engaged voters tend to favor Democrats, generally. And so that will also, I think, be a pretty significant piece of this puzzle in Virginia and New Jersey in particular. Okay, so we talked about Virginia. New Jersey, there's not much more to say. I think, like, a lot of the things that go for Virginia go for New Jersey as well, just because the candidates are so similar. That being said, I'm pretty interested to see what happens in New Jersey on Tuesday, because this polling is really tight. Jack Ciattarelli ran in 2021 against Phil Murphy, who's the sitting governor of New Jersey, and narrowly lost. And that was an environment that was really not good for Democrats. So the fact that Phil Murphy won is pretty astonishing. That being said, New Jersey has been shifting right. Kamala Harris only won it by 6 points in the last election, which was shocking. I think that caught everybody off guard. Democrats at the state level have been running New Jersey for a while. There may well be some, discontent about that, but this is interesting. It's interesting, and it's surprising how tight it is. And I'm curious, I want to look at the results from 2017. Yeah, so Phil Murphy in 2017 won the New Jersey gubernatorial election against Kim Guadagno. Hope I'm saying that right. 56-41. So 15 points. It's not going to be that big of a victory on Tuesday, I don't think. I mean, according to the polling, it's Atlas Intel has Sherrill up 1, Suffolk has Sherrill up 4, YouGov has Sherrill up 10, Quinnipiac, Sherrill plus 8, Emerson College, Sherrill plus 2, Rutgers, Sherrill plus 5. So it's like it's going to be tight. I don't know why that is. I don't know how to explain that. It's looking like the little blurb explainer on the New York Times is saying that if Democrats won this election, it would be the first time since the 1960s that Democrats would be in control for 3 consecutive terms, which I guess that makes sense. And New Jersey has had some Republican governors, most famously Chris Christie. That being said, I don't know how this is going to go. I would be pretty shocked if Mikey Sherrill lost, but this race is looking pretty tight, tighter than it should be, I think. So I don't really know what to make of this. I don't know that much about New Jersey politics. It looks like Cheryl is going to win. I am concerned about how tight this race looks, though, and I am very interested to see what actually happens on Tuesday in terms of margins. All right, as for the New York City mayoral elections, the polling is huge for Mamdani. He's leading by 7, according to Atlas Intel. Marist has him up 16, Quinnipiac 10, Emerson 26 points, which would be crazy if and so that's 51% Mamdani, so an outright majority, to 26% Cuomo, 21% Sliwa, and 1% Eric Adams. Eric Adams has dropped out of this race, so I don't know why he's on there. Maybe people will write him in. I don't know. By now, it's not a question of, is Mamdani going to win? He's going to win. It's a question of how much. And if he has this huge commanding victory, then it's that's going to really help him to govern, because it will say to all of the sort of business owners and stakeholders in New York, there's some serious popular support behind this guy. And already they're sort of starting to acquiesce to the idea that he's going to be the mayor, because he's going to be the mayor. I'm interested to see how he does, because if governing wise he ends up being a huge success story, like, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And I really think it's a shame that he's constitutionally ineligible to be president, because I think he'd be a cool candidate to run, just because he's just captured such energy. He really has something that no one else has. The other thing about the margin of victory for Mamdani is, again, if it's a big victory, that sends a really strong message to Democrats, like Democratic elected officials. It sends a huge message to the DNC. It sends a huge message to Washington. I am really encouraged by the fact that we've seen a lot of Democrats, or at least Democrats who know what the fuck they're doing, falling in line with Mamdani. People like Kathy Hochul, the fact that she's stepped up and been like, I'm going to endorse him, and endorse him early, right? You had Hakeem Jeffries wait until the last second to endorse. What the fuck? This doesn't make any sense to me. It, really made me sort of come around to the idea of Chiase primarying him. Like, what the fuck, Jeffries? Like, you should have endorsed him when he won the primary. What are you talking about? You should have endorsed him before that, honestly. But whatever. So Kathy Hochul has been a huge surrogate for him. Same with Tish James. Some of these, sort of very middle of the road, Kathy Hochul is a pretty centrist Democrat. Okay. And the last race that I'll just talk about briefly is the California Prop 50 election. So this is, again, it's looking like the polling is saying that Prop 50 is going to succeed. Prop 50 is basically a ballot referendum, a plebiscite in California that is designed to ask the voters of California to approve new congressional district boundaries that would be more favorable to Democrats in the 2026 midterm elections. So basically it's trying to gerrymander some Republicans out of their seats. But the only reason they're doing this is because Texas lawmakers already did this to Democrats at Donald Trump's behest and without the people's blessing, right? They just did it themselves. They didn't ask the people to vote on it. Gavin Newsom came around and said, we're going to redistrict, and we're going to fucking kick you Republicans out if you do this. And we're also going to do it with the blessing of the voters. So if this goes through, then that's going to work to counteract some of that gerrymandering taking place in Texas. And then there are all these sort of state legislatures around the country that are controlled by Democrats that are going to see what they can do in the upcoming sessions. States like Illinois, which is already pretty gerrymandered, but Virginia, as I mentioned, if Democrats take control of that state legislature and governor's mansion, then Virginia will jump in. I think that what the Prop 50 election results will also say is, okay, how energized is the voting public towards resisting Donald Trump? And as a resident of California, I can say, the energy on the ground here seems really strong. It seems like people are really fired up about Prop 50. People are voting. Young people are voting, which is a huge deal. And young people are also really enthusiastic and fired up about it. So that's heartening to see. And I'm going to go vote on Tuesday. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And that also has very direct effects on the national political situation writ large. Okay, so that's all I have for now. Thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you all another time. Feel free to shoot me an email. My email is bn.campaigndispatch@gmail.com. And until next time.